This is Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast where we bring Jesus into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. My email address, jason@sportspectrum.com. Jason@sportspectrum.com. Would love to hear from you. Any feedback you have on today's show or any guest ideas going forward regarding Sports Spectrum, you can email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. And we are presented today by the International Justice Mission, IJM. Believing every person deserves to be safe and free from violence, you can help join the fight to end slavery in our lifetime. It still exists. It's still a problem, and IJM is combating it. You can join IJM by checking out their website, ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF, and become a Freedom Partner today. We're also presented by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. You can join with Compassion and professional athletes right now to help team up and fill a stadium. And what they're doing is asking for you to help come alongside with them and donate to help these children through the critical next 12 months as COVID-19 has really impacted a lot of children across the world. So check it out at compassion.com/teamup. And in a little while, I'll tell you more about how you can become a part of the great work with Compassion. Bart Millard is our guest today here on Sports Spectrum. I'm going to be honest, this is an interview I've wanted to do for a while because ever since we launched Sports Spectrum's audio show, if you will, between the podcast and now the radio show, Bart's been a guy I've wanted to have on for a while. I actually met him 8 years ago at ESPN, had invited him and the rest of the band to come and get a tour of ESPN and check it out because Bart is such a big sports fan, and got an opportunity to build a relationship with him then. And just grateful now that we were able to connect, yes, amidst a pandemic. In his band, MercyMe, normally they're touring right now and out on the road doing their thing in the midst of a summer where a lot of people are out usually attending concerts. And that's not happening this summer because of the pandemic. So Bart was gracious with his time, and I've been wanting to do this interview for a while. And we talked a lot of sports. We talked a lot about his relationship with his dad and forgiveness. And we talked a lot more sports. And that's really the kind of conversation that Bart and I would normally have anyway. So hopefully you guys enjoy this conversation with Bart Millard, lead singer of MercyMe. And if you don't know who MercyMe is, man, go look him up. But I'm sure if you've heard the song I Can Only Imagine or Even If or Greater or any of their big songs, hits on the radio, you know who MercyMe is. So this is going to be a treat. Talking to Bart Millard. He joins us here today on Sports Spectrum. Bart, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you, my friend. I'm happy to be here. And just so that it makes sense to everyone, the Sports Spectrum, I'm here because I am the biggest sports fan, maybe next to Jason Romano. But I am a massive sports fan. I'm a wannabe.
Well, that's what I want to ask, because you and I actually met. Let's go all the way back. It's 2012. I invited you and MercyMe, I know, right? 8 years ago, to come to Bristol through Twitter, of all places, to get a tour of ESPN. I knew you were in town and had no connection to you other than just using a tweet to say, hey, I work at this pretty large place. Would you like to come and see it? You agreed and came down.
That's all it took. Yeah.
And it showed me how big of a sports fan you were. Where did that sports love come from for you, that gigantic sports fandom?
Oh man, I don't know. It's been in my life forever. Like my dad like was I guess it's kind of in the movie, but my dad was a full scholarship player at SMU back in the 60s, and he was really, really good. And if I'm probably get the story wrong, but basically he quit because I think he got homesick. He may be hurt, but he missed his fiance, ended up getting married. Mm-hmm. Back then, to go pro wasn't the best paying job there was. And so, but he stayed in touch with his team. And it was like, I want to say about 10 years later, about the time I was born, maybe less than that, he stayed in touch with the team, and they said, hey man, like Vince Lombardi's Packers and Johnny United's Colts were both kind of looking at you to be drafted, but then you would finish school first. And so I was named after Bart Starr because I was born about the time that he got the news.
Yeah.
And so my dad was a Dallas Texans fan, not as much as the Cowboys for a while. And so he loved Vince Lombardi. So anyway, so it's just been a part of my life forever. I played as many sports as I could. I was built to play football, but wasn't as talented as my dad. I had a soft spot, man. I'd get in trouble for helping the other guy up all the time and like apologizing.
You're too nice.
And they were like, yeah, I was too soft. And so, but I've always loved it, man. It's like I'm growing up in Dallas, like I'm everything Dallas sports. I played baseball growing up, but not much. But then I was there when Nolan was pitching for the Rangers and broke I think I was, whatever record he would break. I swear I was there for all of them. And it changed my life. Like, he's my absolute sports hero. And I fell in love with baseball like never before. And then, it's just been monumental moments in my life. When the band started in '94, our drummer Robbie is a diehard Cardinals fan, diehard. And so during the whole Sosa, Mark McGuire thing, we were traveling, doing independent shows, and we got to try to make a few games, just kept being obsessed with it. And baseball is like, football is my first love, but there's something beyond sports with baseball that it's hard to explain. If the Cowboys lose, my Sunday is ruined.
Yep.
And wait, aren't you a Cowboys fan?
Big time.
You are, aren't you?
Yes.
It affects me. Like, baseball doesn't affect me. Baseball is just like where time stands still. It's the only place to where I can sit for 3 or 4 hours, get whatever work done, not pay attention to the game, and not lose track of what's happening. And there's just something so beautiful about sitting in a stadium that time of year. Opening day is one of my favorite times of the year. This has been a tough one. It's all about spring, and then football in the fall. It's just, I don't know. Like, everybody says, what's your favorite sport? Football is, but there's something larger than life about baseball that's hard to explain. I don't go to football games and have the same feeling that I do when I go to a baseball game.
Obviously,
does that make sense?
It makes complete sense to me. I've always said I'd rather watch football at home in my man cave by myself, or maybe with one other person. And baseball, let's bring 20 people and let's have an outing and a lot of fun. And I could talk to my daughter, who doesn't like when I talk to her now because she's a teenager, but I could talk to her then and explain to her baseball, or explain to her, we could be talking about anything, and feel like you said, like I haven't missed any of the game. And then when somebody does hit a home run, it's a pretty cool moment, and you stand up and you're part of it, but then you can kind of go back to having an outing. You can't really do that in football, or you miss a lot.
Right. And if you're lucky, you catch the drama and hopefully the last couple of innings, maybe the last inning, if you're lucky to see that. But that's with my kids. They love baseball. But like, when come playoffs, I'll hunker down in front of a TV like I do. But every Sunday, football, don't talk to me. I'm watching football. Baseball is just as much about finding the best hot dog in the park as it is sitting there and watching. It's the nostalgia and everything about it. It genuinely is America's pastime. And it's just, it feels like you're going to a time that was better. I don't know if that makes sense. It's so connected to my past, and it's something I want to pass on to my kids, to where, they can love the Cowboys and that's great, but my kids still talk about when we went to a game here or whatever. So it's just a different love, and I'm dying on the inside.
Well, I was just going to ask you
baseball.
that, because we're in the midst of a pandemic, and there are obviously much larger things happening in the world that are way more important than sports. But from a sports perspective, I'm hurting. I'm missing it so much. I have to imagine you're the same way.
There's no question. And what's funny is that, there were statistics, I don't know, I can't remember where I read it, but they were talking about how, like, during the Depression, during a tragic, like a 9/11 and different things we go through, that entertainment becomes the escape, whether it's concerts or sports or whatever. And obviously in my lifetime, it's the first time I ever seen anything to where entertainment was virtually the first thing to go down.
Right.
And it's going to be the last thing to come back up. We're sitting here like, we've got tours on hold, and we're just kind of twiddling our thumbs, because our rule of thumb is until Disney and the NBA figures it out, we can't go to those arenas or go to massive crowds. And so we're just waiting to see what they do, especially the NBA and hockey. It's like, we play in those same places. If they're not doing it regularly, I doubt we're going to do it, once a month or whatever you want to call it, going to that city. So yeah, that's the weird thing, is we've had so many things that don't affect entertainment, to where people escape to go to the movies. And they talked about like during like the Depression and all this kind of stuff, the movie industry will actually go up because people want to get away from difficult things. And we don't have that. It's a different way of entertaining ourselves. And that's what's so strange about it. And so it's in baseball would be, gosh, man, if this was something else that had us, I don't know, if the circumstances are different to where baseball is still available, I would not miss a stinking game. I would be traveling all over to go to these. If I had this much time off and there was baseball, I would be in heaven as long as I could pay my bills.
Right? Exactly.
So it's weird. It's like, yeah. And it's like, like Mike Matheny's a dear friend of mine. He's manager of the Royals. And about twice a week, I'm like, okay, I see what ESPN's saying, but is there going to be baseball? And he's like, man, I'm hoping. He's like, I'm hanging there. And I'm like, I said, forget that. Is there going to be baseball where I can go to it? And he's like, he goes, our hope is that before it's over, and he's hoping the same thing. But
yeah, it's hard.
I don't know. It's weird.
It is weird.
I'll tell you, you'll appreciate this, that my curse in life being an avid Cowboys fan is that two of my dear friends, I have no friends on the Cowboys. It's like literally over all these years, John Kitna is the only one that I've ever had like an actual, like, he's a MercyMe fan. So I don't know what the Cowboys need to get it together, but two of my dearest friends currently are Doug Peterson and Ben Roethlisberger.
Oh.
Like now I need one 49er to complete the circle.
Jeez, isn't it funny how that works?
Friends with. I know it. I'm waiting for Terrell Owens to go back with the 49ers and start liking me. That would be the epitome of, something like that. It's like the irony that these are my friends and they're great guys. And I have to, like, under the cloak of darkness, text Doug, hey, I hope you win the playoffs. Don't tell anybody that I know.
I totally can relate because obviously where I used to work and where we met at ESPN, you're working with a lot of people who you openly cheered against for so many years. Yep. I can remember Brian Dawkins and working with Brian and thinking, man, I used to root so hard for this dude to lose every game. But then you meet him and he's a brother in Christ and he's just an amazing dude. And you talk to him and you're like, man, I'm so glad I'm so glad that I'm friends with you, but I feel like you've ruined my sports fandom on some level because right. I still want to cheer for the Cowboys on Sunday, right. But I know this dude, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I've had to, every time I meet somebody that's not a Cowboy, like I feel like I go there so fast to go, I can't like your team. I'm sure you're a great guy. I don't know if you remember when we came to visit, do you remember pulling Darren Woodson aside and going, we're not alone or whatever it was?
I did.
So great.
I did. I was just going to bring up the Darren Woodson thing because working with him was a whole nother, like, to me, that's a different level. And Brian
right.
Dawkins is a great dude. And I love Brian to death. And he's just an example, but when you work with the guy, like I remember spending time with Emmett. It's actually in my new book about the time I met Emmett. And that was a different level for me as a fan. And so when you can find right. somebody that you can become friends with, that you're actually were fans of the team, I mean, that's a whole, like John Kitna, you didn't care. If John Kitna was going in, you were going crazy because he was a Cowboy.
Yeah. No question. Yeah. So that's the weird dilemma is that Ben Roethlisberger came to our show in Pittsburgh last year.
Yeah.
And super great guy. And he invited us back to his house. And so after the show, and so we were at his house till like 5 a.m, just hanging out. And
how cool is that?
We've become really good friends, and his, this is right after he had surgery in his arm, and he was like, man, if I'm back to throwing, he goes, because I told him, I was like, one of my dreams, I've never stood on the sideline for a game.
Really?
He's like, oh, well, we're going to, not during the game. I've done sidelines before, but never been allowed to hang out. I don't even know if that's a thing, but I haven't been able to do it. And he goes, oh, we'll make it happen. And then this stuff hit, and I was like, dude, I said, let me tell you what, if you retire this year before fans, you are dead to me. And I said, you better play at least one game with the crowd so I can come. He goes, oh, don't worry. And I'm like, I'm not kidding. You better be in some meeting to say I have to do one with fans, or call me family and put me in there. I don't care. Just get me there.
Well, Bart, remember, he's Ben Roethlisberger. He kind of will have this clout and this pull for the rest of his life, I'm thinking. So you're not in that much trouble here.
Oh, no, but I want to see him play. I want him to walk out there and throw the ball and stuff. But yes. I was like, why are we friends now? Why couldn't you be like a rookie? It's like you're about to retire, and then nobody wants to hang out with you then. He started laughing. I was like, same with me. As soon as I'm done.
I love that. Bart Millard is our guest here today on Sports Spectrum. The movie, you mentioned the movie a little bit. I can only imagine. That's got to be so surreal. And it's been a couple years now, but the fact that your life and so many people almost will act like they know you and they're best friends with you. I'm not saying they're not. A lot of people are, but because they saw your movie and they have this depiction of your life on the big screen, and the movie did well too. So it's not like it was like 5 people saw it. A lot of people saw this movie. When you look back now, first of all, how much of that movie, because I talked to Andy Irwin about this, who was part of the team that put it together, the Irwin brothers, but how much of this movie is what really happened in Bart Millard's life? So I know there's a lot of people that might ask you that, but it's not all 100%, right? It's close, but it's not 100%.
Yeah, I would say it's about as accurate as you can be with when you're trying to cram 25 years of your life into under 2 hours. Right. Is the best way to put it. Like, there are little things, like, it's funny because like my friends that grew up with me, like the little things they can't get past, like, like I grew up in Greenville, Texas. And so I remember talking to the directors like, hey, we're going to have some shots of you playing high school football. And I was like, okay. And they were like, but your team was red. Why were you red if it's Greenville? And I was like, it's a long story. And they were like, that's too confusing. You're going to be green and white. That only makes sense. And it's going to be a Longhorn because that's the most obvious Texas thing that's out there for high school. And it was what was available to them when they filmed it all in Oklahoma. And so they were like, your friends have to get over it. Like, if it's Greenville, it's a red team. People are going to hear the next dialogue wondering, why are they red? It looks like a bad movie choice instead of reality. Yeah. So I was like, okay, so there's a lot of those little things, but the biggest thing was probably that what came across as everything happening maybe within a year or whatever in the movie took place more like a 5 to 6 year period. So it's like, it's just compressing everything. And so, I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in a little neighborhood in town, but that I guess didn't look as good on camera. And once again, they're having to work with what they have in the state of Oklahoma, where they get all these incentives to film or whatever. So little things like that. But the main thing for me was, because when I first got the script and we're seeing things, I'm like, well, this isn't exactly this. This happened at noon and not. I was nitpicking because I didn't know. They're like, okay, buddy, now you got to understand something. Like, this is like I think the way Andy puts it, if you look at this as a painting, like these different strokes under magnifying glass make no sense. When you back up, it makes a beautiful portrait. That's what we're trying to do. Yeah. And so you can't just keep it under the microscope. And he was like, so the only thing, the compromise was the scenes of like abuse and the discussions I had with my dad and those moments that I think are core to the story, those are as accurate as I can recall them to be, if that makes sense. So to me, they're very accurate. Like, people are like, so, like when he hit the plate over your head, that was made up? I was like, no, sadly that part was true, but I think he threw it across the room, hit me in the head, but either way, it pretty much happened. Mm-hmm. So those things we treated those with kid gloves. And then whether my football team was green or, whatever, like, or where I lived, that kind of stuff they definitely wanted to Hollywood it and make it look better on screen. But for the most part, I would say the parts that matter to me are absolutely accurate.
We'll get back to our conversation with Bart Millard from MercyMe in just a second, but want to tell you more about our friends at IJM, the International Justice Mission. And what many people do not know is that violence is a threat to so many around the world who are poor. It's as much a part of daily life as hunger, disease, or homelessness, and it's often overlooked, but not by IJM. They believe that every person, we believe this as well, that every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. And by partnering with local authorities to rescue victims of violence, bring criminals to justice, restore survivors, and strengthen justice systems, IJM is helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence worldwide. But they can't do this without our help. That's why I'm reaching out to you to consider joining them and becoming a Freedom Partner, some of IJM's most loyal partners in the work of justice. And your support of $24 or more each month helps survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they're rescued until they're fully restored. It may not seem like a lot to give, but it's life-changing. So I'm encouraging you to join me in becoming a Freedom Partner. It makes a huge difference in the world. Check out ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF, and become a Freedom Partner today. We're also presented by Compassion International, and this is a chance for you to team up with pro athletes for children in poverty. COVID-19 has left nearly 70,000 children without a child sponsorship through Compassion International. That's the capacity of an average NFL stadium. And as the world is in the grips of COVID-19, it's led to more sickness. Parents can't work. Food is scarce. So Compassion and some of our pro athlete friends have teamed up to respond to this challenge. With your help, they're hoping to fill the stadium with urgent support for a stadium's worth of children in crisis. Here's how you can help. Teaming up with pro athletes to fill the stadium, you can donate. You go to compassion.com/teamup. Compassion.com/teamup and donate to help children through the critical next 12 months. Every donation helps fill a seat toward a year of needed funding. Again, that website, compassion.com/teamup, and help release a child from poverty today. Now back to our conversation with Bart Millard, the lead singer from MercyMe, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Obviously, you mentioned the relationship with your dad. That's sort of the central point of this whole movie. And it's become a huge hit, and it's impacted so many people's lives. I can't imagine the amount of people that have told you, hey, you're telling my story. I had the same thing with my book on forgiveness, and a very similar story as you had with your dad. Not all the same, but very similar in parallels. I'm curious now, as you look back on the relationship today that you had with your dad. He's been gone now for a while, but
Right.
do you view it differently now, 2-3 years ago, than you did maybe 2-3 years ago, in terms of seeing how that relationship, and you've told the story at concerts, I've been to concerts where you shared it, but when it comes out as a movie and suddenly you see the amount of people that it can impact, did that change anything in terms of what you went through and understanding the purpose that maybe God had to kind of put you through to see the impact now that this thing can really have?
In a way, I mean, I think it wasn't as, it didn't feel like being thrown into the deep end all of a sudden. In some ways it did, but because, we've been a band for almost 25 years, and Imagine is one of the first songs I've ever written, that I've been kind of telling this story, and it's in doing shows. Basically, my career has been very therapeutic from the standpoint of my dad has been almost the center of that for a very long time, just because the song was inspired by him. And so, I can't imagine people, being vulnerable to write a book that's just works in a cubicle the rest of the time. Let's say the book takes off and also there's a movie made, like The Blind Side's a great example. It's like, that would be shocking to oh gosh, now everybody knows the story, to where I've been telling the story for a really long time. And so that part of it was, it actually probably helped with the process. It wasn't, our example was, you have somebody that wins the lottery and all of a sudden they got something they've never had, and it almost makes their life worse than it did. Most people that win the lottery end up just crashing and burning. And I could see that on any success or anything, but I feel like we've been kind of on this slow, steady, we've always said, man, maybe the movie did so well because we spent the last 20 years promoting a movie we didn't know was going to come out by singing the song over and over and over.
Yeah.
So that part of it, it was the part that I can appreciate the most, was that on the scale, we sold a lot of records, and we've seen when Imagine went mainstream years ago, I wouldn't have wished that on my worst enemy, how crazy it was. Our shows doubled, we're doing all this mainstream stuff and trying to keep the Christian tours going. And that was crazy. The movie was a whole different level, but the marketing, if they put into it, and how fast it's just such a fast burn. If you're lucky, you get maybe 7 to 9 weeks in the box office. And then when it's done, it is done as far as promotions go. And then it's just well, we did our job. Now the DVD comes out, and it just kind of is on cruise control, to where we'll spend 2 years promoting an album. And so it's a dead sprint. Everything that we had to do from a few weeks before the movie came out to those first maybe month after it was out was nonstop. But then it just ended. You talk about just going through a weird depression. It's just everything comes to a stop. Man, this is weird.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want it to go any longer. It's just odd that you don't. It's just different mindset. So I can now appreciate how heavy and hard they hit it, and so quickly. And as far as just personally, one of the things that through the whole thing, the thing that telling your story, living, it's one thing, telling it in little bits between songs, but having to tell specifically the story and watch it made and put on a screen it's crazy, man. It's it's very emotional to kind of relive some of that stuff, even though it's different actors and things like that. But I'll tell you, one of the things that really hit me the most that was life changing and made me appreciate it was when Dennis Quaid started. He came in a little bit later. I started shooting all the scenes with my dad, and so they flew me out to watch, and so I get there and didn't have time to meet Dennis because they're about to shoot. And so the first scene that I see is they set me in a chair, and it's when he's in the hospital and they tell him he has cancer, and it's got like my dad's name on the work shirt. Yeah. And it was like, didn't see it coming, wasn't even warned. And it was like a punch in the gut. Went straight from that to the plate scene where they smashed the plate on my head.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, this is all in like the first day and that I was there. And I was like, holy cow, we're just really going to go for all the gut punches right now. But in that scene, I will say that, and it was to where I almost ruined the scene because I started crying out loud, was in the scene when he breaks the plate over my head. The idea is he breaks the plate. Bart's like, what's wrong with you? You're crazy. And then Bart storms out of the house and leaves. And so that was supposed to be the end of the scene. And I'm tucked away in the house, like around the corner watching a monitor. And so when Bart leaves, shuts the door, they're supposed to yell cut, but they don't. They keep rolling. So now you've got the scene where Dennis or my dad's in the room alone and I'm already gone. And Dennis starts like he starts breaking down, like he's angry at himself that he can't control his temper. And he starts breaking down and then he starts cleaning up the mess. And what's crazy, for the first time in my life, I was sitting there watching him as he was my dad. And I've never once thought about the turmoil that he may have gone through once I wasn't there.
Right.
Like, cause I just thought, man, he's just a monster and he loves being a monster. And I never looked at it as this is something that he can't control, or that half of his anger was towards himself for having a short fuse. As a dad, I totally get that now. And those moments to where it looks like I'm angry at my kid, but I'm angry at myself for getting upset about something so trivial, if that makes sense. And so watching him process that, I started like tears ran in my face, and I had my mouth covered because I was afraid I was going to ruin the take by making some noise. And as soon as it was over, Dennis laid eyes on me, and he saw me kind of crying, and he thought something was wrong. He goes, man, was it wrong? Was it wrong? I was like, dude, this is as crazy as it sounds. I just saw a side of my dad through you that I've never thought about, of how hard was it for him when I stormed out to be left alone. It was just a crazy feeling. And there are moments like that to where I almost had to, and maybe because I'm older and as a father, I was almost able to stand in my dad's shoes, not justify the things he did, but to see that this was a constant struggle with him, with the temper that he had, and the idea that he was hurt by his own actions, sometimes as much as I was just, that was totally new to me. And I don't think I would have ever even stopped to think about that unless I went through something like this.
Wow. I mean, whenever I share my own story, I say that was the big game changer for me to be able to forgive my dad, was seeing it from his perspective, which I never wanted to do either. Kind of like you, I was just like, well, my dad is a monster and he's causing all this pain. And I would either storm out like you did in the movie, or I would lash back out at him. But I could never see that, you know what, maybe he's just not really happy with his behavior and his drinking and his addiction and all these things that my dad struggled with. And it changed everything for me. Fortunately, I was able to do that and still have my father around. The forgiveness aspect here is a big one. Can we go there just for a second and understanding what you've learned about forgiveness in the process of really truly forgiving your dad? Because there's a moment in the movie where you look at him, the person who plays you in the movie, looks at him and says, he asks if you could ever forgive me. And you said, well, I know God might be able to forgive you, but I can't. And I'm like, wow, that forgiveness aspect is such a key component to this whole entire movie. Can you just talk about that for a little bit?
Well, and one thing is, the reason it's taken me so long for this, and the movie kind of forced me to do it, is because there's this weird thing. Once my dad died, it's like part of me was like, all is forgiven. He's instantly a saint, and you stop recalling how bad things were. It's like you give him a pass, if that makes sense. Like, it wasn't that bad. In fact, that's where my brother is still. Like, our relationship has been tough since the movie, because my brother's been like, he was bad, but that's how everything was. It's like, nope, nobody was pinning their kid to the wall by their throat. Like, that's, and so in the movie, and going through some grief counseling, losing loved that my wife and I went through after her brother was killed years ago. And that's when it started connecting my childhood with how I react to things now, was the beginning steps. But the biggest reason I've never really tackled this with my father was, one, when he passed away, he got a hall pass. I didn't think it was that bad. I buried it. And then my mom, who I was a mama's boy, my mom really did leave, and she remarried and left when I was a kid. And that scene was pretty accurate. Like, I mean, there's more to it, but there's a whole reason why it happened that makes more sense in the movie, but they wanted to portray it from the eyes of an 8-year-old or 10-year-old. And so that's how it was. And that's how it felt.
Yeah.
But, anyway, but my mom, she's still alive. And so I've been dealing with forgiving her and mending that relationship for years, because she was still here. So that's occupied my time more than anything. And it wasn't until this movie and going through counseling where I realized, oh man, I got so much to unpack here, to where, because it's easy to say, of course I forgive my dad. I imagine, but then I think my counselor was the first one to say, isn't it funny how everybody's like, man, your dad must have been great. Imagine is a great song. She goes, but Imagine has nothing to do with your father. It does not address your father. She goes, it's the greatest deflection ever. It's like, yeah, your dad died, so you became consumed with heaven. So you write a song about heaven, and everybody thinks, oh man, your dad was great. And she goes, but it does, and she's right. It does not address my dad. And that was, it was easier to be consumed with that. And so it wasn't until counseling in the movie to where I genuinely had to go there. And there's a lot of things I had to forgive him for, even after most of it was after he passed away. There was redemption. Our last about a year and a half before he died, where it was beautiful. But it was like, it literally was like, let's put everything horrible on hold, because I don't know how long I'm going to have this amazing man in front of me. Like, he would say, I'm sorry, but I just had a short memory, because it's almost like a wounded pet. I so wanted his attention.
Yeah.
That it's like, it's a do-over. Let's pretend none of that happened. And so, yes, it affected me over the long term and how I am as a father now. And I had to deal with it. But make no mistake, when he passed away, he was the most important figure in my life, and the man that I wanted to become when I became an adult, because of how much his life transformed in that year and a half. But it doesn't mean that I didn't have issues I had to deal with, and for most of my adult life. And so forgiveness was I was quick to forgive him, just, at that time, because I just wanted him, I wanted his affection. I wanted his time. And so that part was really easy. As far as forgiving on a deeper level, I think that I didn't even have a way I couldn't even comprehend how much damage had been done until I got older and a little wiser and learned more. And so like, people ask, like, how could you do it so fast? I was like, man, as soon as things come up, I feel like I'm still forgiving him today. It's just like, there is a long list, and yes, all is forgiven. I love my dad, but there'll be moments where I'll see myself act a certain way in front of my wife or my kids. And I don't instantly go, thanks a lot, Dad. But there is a part of me like, oh, I know where this comes from. And so in a way, that's an act of forgiving him. And, and ironically, my dad was the very one that told me that before he passed away, that you don't have to be like this. Like, this is not your curse or your burden to bear. Don't ever tell yourself this is just the way that it is, and this is just who I am. And so my dad was teaching me identity before I even knew that identity was a thing. And it's crazy that I could come full circle to where he could tell me that physically and like in person before he passed away, of just, oh, by the way, this is not what I've done, is not who you are. You are better than me. You're going to go further than me. It was just, just an amazing transformation. And so, yeah, it's forgiveness is one of the most powerful things out there, no question. And I think, honestly, the band and I were talking today with this whole current situation with protests and all that stuff, and every statue's being taken down and all this kind of stuff. And I'd mentioned, like, there's a lot of these Confederate statues that I think should not be, they were literally set up in the front of the courthouse back in the day to remind people that we're still superior to this. Like, they were put up with bad intentions. Yeah. So I believe those things shouldn't be glorified. Maybe a museum, like we do the Holocaust Museum or whatever. But now we're taking down so many things like Columbus, and we're kind of going after everybody. And I'm not saying I necessarily disagree with all of it, but man, if there's not room for some level of grace, because I even said, I said, man, if anything that I've done remotely good is overshadowed with how many times I've messed up, then we're all kind of done for. And that's not me justifying and saying that I think this or this should go up. I'm like, at some point, is there a level of grace and forgiveness? Without forgiveness, none of this works. It doesn't work at all. It's like, I mean, you can, if this person's the most racist person, you screaming at them does not make them less racist. Right. It's like, at some point, like Jesus would do, is like to say, I love you regardless. It's like, we've always said, as a band, we decided a few years ago, we're going to stop telling people to quit sinning and just try to show them who they are in Christ. It's more fun, and it's way more appealing, is that for somebody to say, this is not just fire insurance to get out of hell, but I actually want this. This is what I want for me. It seems better. And it's, and so, but that's what I think forgiveness is to me. Like, it's like, I don't forgive someone because I feel like they're sitting around just like having the worst life because I'm holding this over their head. No, I forgive them because it's eating at me. It's killing me. Mm-hmm. It's like, we are not made to hold grudges. And sometimes we keep thinking like, well, I forgive you. Like, you're doing them a favor. Man, that person ain't thinking about you no more if they've done you wrong. That's right. It's for you to be able to let it go and you to be able to move on. And so, yeah, so I say it's the most underestimated superpower there is forgiveness.
So true. Last couple of questions here with Bart Millard on Sports Spectrum. Let's pivot a little bit and have a little more fun with the sports side of things. Pretend you're Marty McFly and you have a DeLorean and you can transport yourself back to any era to watch any sporting event. Where's the flux capacitor taking you to, Bart Millard?
I would like, even though they didn't win, I would really like to go to the Ice Bowl.
The Ice Bowl,
that would be pretty amazing.
Yeah,
I would love to go there. I just remember my dad talked about it so much, and I'd love to go to any of those times when Tom Landry and them won Super Bowl, that kind of stuff. Of course, there's a billion baseball things. I'd love to see Hank Aaron. Yeah. Yeah, my first thought was like in the 90s but I was alive. I just didn't get to go when the Cowboys had their run and stuff. But that kind of stuff, the things that I heard about that growing up, like, I'd love to see Kirk Gibson pumping his fist going around. The Ice Bowl would probably be the one that that was such a, that story was so ingrained in my head from my dad. Like, that was he thought, even though he just thought it was the greatest game ever. And so I would love to be a part of that.
My grandfather is a big Packers, Vince Lombardi guy. And so I grew up hearing about that game too. But I'm thinking, in the midst of the game, right, you're waking up and it's 15 degrees below zero in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Oh, yeah. Do you think that they realized that they were walking into history here? Not just the Cowboys, but the fans. I mean, that's insane to think that, I'm going to be a part of the most famous game maybe ever, when you're waking up just trying to figure out how to stay warm for 3 hours.
No doubt. Yeah, it's just another game. Like, they could never even imagine the NFL being a big deal.
Right.
Even though it's like, and now to look back at, like, I think about Babe Ruth and all that kind of stuff, and it'd be amazing to see. But for me personally, man, like, the Ice Bowl is so, I can hear it now, the frozen tundra, Lambeau Field, like, just that would be the one thing that, like, I know too much about that game just from hearing it from my dad, that it's like, that's what I'd be miserable, and I would probably regret going to 15 below or whatever. But that game is such a big deal to me. And that's why I'm I'm one of the owners of the Packers because of that. Like, after being named Bart Starr, and then that whole thing, because my dad wasn't a Cowboys fan, so he was okay with the Packers winning. I just thought forever, man, the Cowboys lost. How could you? And he's like, you're not named after Bart Starr for just like coincidence. I was like, oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah.
Did you ever get a chance to meet Bart Starr? Because I got to talk to him one time at ESPN in the early days when I got there. And I've told people this story. He was genuinely the nicest person that I've ever talked to on the phone with regards to anything to do with sports. Like, he was that dude. That's such a nice guy. Have you done that research on Bart Starr? Maybe you haven't met him, but just knowing the impact of that guy?
I didn't get to meet him, but I was supposed to. I don't know if you remember Todd Jones. He's close to the Tigers.
Yeah, of course.
And Todd's been a dear friend for years. Well, Bart Jr. is his financial advisor or something like that.
Wow.
And so I was in Alabama. I told him, I was like, man, my dream is to meet Bart Starr. And I've always been, other than Cowboys, the Packers are my other team. I've always liked the Packers because of that.
Sure.
And I was a huge Brett Favre fan. Like more recently, one of my favorite quarterbacks ever. I loved the way he played the game. And anyway, and so Bart was going to be in town, and I was going to come into Alabama, and I was going to meet him finally. And Todd set it up. Well, he was under the weather and didn't make the trip. And I actually went out there to, I was somewhere nearby. I made the trip down there in between shows, and he couldn't make it. I was kind of bummed.
Yeah.
And Bart felt so bad that he got me a full-blown helmet with Brett Favre signed on one side and him signed on the other, and to apologize for not meeting me.
Wow.
And so that's as close as I got. And I was like, man, he didn't have to do that. I mean, he didn't, but he was so like, I'm so sorry that I was under the weather. Maybe we can make it up. And then sadly he passed away. But yeah, that was to me, he was still the nicest guy ever, because who does that? Who goes out of the way to find Brett? He may have had the helmet sitting around. I don't care. I want to think that he drove to Brett's house one night, woke him up, said, look, this kid's really cool. So, but either way, just so nice.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing. Well, that shows you that I'm not, when I say he was the nicest guy to talk to on the phone, well, that gesture right there says everything about who he was as a person too. You still have that helmet, I hope, right?
Heck yeah, I still have it. Yeah, man.
All right. So let's take the DeLorean and go future a little bit here. You've had a lot of cool sports experiences, especially you mentioned being friends with Matheny, and you and I were talking beforehand about an experience you have with the St. Louis Cardinals. That may be the answer to the question I'm about to ask you, but what's been the coolest sort of sports experience that's taken place with your life because of the fact that you are a musician and had songs that people knew and listened to, and you got to meet some cool people through it? What's been the coolest sports experience for you?
There's a bunch, but the one I told you about would probably be one of the top ones. Was everybody we've met they're a fan of, I've learned that most musicians want to be athletes, most athletes want to be musicians. And
absolutely.
So this connection. And so we've made a lot of friends in baseball, and we met Mike Matheny when he had just left, I want to say, the Cardinals to be the catcher for the Giants. And he had reached out to us and wanted to get our albums to all of his teammates. And when we were out there and went to see him play there, I don't know, what is it called now? I know the name changes, the San Francisco Stadium, which is the greatest stadium in the world.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know whatever it is. It's the greatest baseball stadium there is.
Yeah.
And so we went out to meet him, and they happened to be playing the Cardinals. And then Pujols wanted to. He was a fan, and Robbie's freaking out, so he introduced us to Pujols. So we became friends with all of them. So anyway, so my two favorite experiences are second place would be that when Matheny was the manager of the Cardinals, he was doing a fundraiser, and wanted to come out and play for it on their day off. And then they had a game the next night. He's like, man, if you come, bring your kids. We're going to make it special. So we got there. And just to say thanks, we met him at the stadium. They had our uniforms made, their names, suited us up. And then, according to him, he cleared out the stadium. It was a day off. It was already cleared out, but he made it sound important. Yeah. And he pitched to us and did BP with all of us, with Matheny pitching to us, suited up as Cardinals. And it was like,
wow.
It was, being with my kids, it may be number one. It's pretty, my kids being there and stuff was a moment we'll never forget. And hopefully baseball comes back and we can do it with the Royals. The one, it's a close one or two. This one's probably the most surreal. So we were going to go see Albert. The Cardinals were playing the Cubs at Wrigley. So that was a big deal. And so we were going to go meet Albert to watch him play. So we got there early, had lunch or something that day. And then we came out of the stadium, and we're sitting there, and it's packed, and it just starts pouring rain. So there's like a 2-hour game delay. So they put the tarp on. We're sitting there going, oh, man. And we knew the bus had to roll later. We didn't know if we were going to make the whole thing. And so he calls us and says, hey, come down and meet me at this gate. So we go down and we meet him, and he brings us into the visitors' locker room, which is like a broom closet at Wrigley. It's very small, and they're all packed in there, and every one of them are in there. There's nowhere to go because it's all raining.
Right. And
so we're standing there, and we're just like, there's 5 of us and Albert in the middle of the room. Everybody's staring at us, and Albert's like, it's too crowded. Let's get out of here. I'm like, okay. So we go. We don't know where we're going. Well, he decides we're going to go onto Wrigley Field and stroll the entire park with Albert and a sold-out Cubs audience with the tarp. As it's now sprinkling, they're waiting to dry it off. And so we just go for a stroll as if we're the only place on the planet. And we walk through the ivy. Albert stopped to take pictures of us in the ivy for us. And he's fully suited, and people are throwing quarters at us. Get a haircut. Cause we're with Albert, they're yelling at us. They're overall pretty nice. They weren't trying to hurt us, but they would you'd see an empty water bottle, and Robbie had a mohawk at the time. Get a haircut, you loser. Join the Cubs or whatever. And Albert never heard it. He was laughing. He was, living alone or whatever. And I'm walking, and we slowly, I bet it took us 20 minutes to walk every inch of the outskirts of that entire field from home base all the way around, slowly strolling. And I'm looking around going, this will never happen again in my life. These people are waiting and angry for a Cubs, and the rivalry of the Cubs and Cardinals. And I'm walking their field with Albert Pujols. It was insane and a little scary, but those would be the two moments that they'll never happen again.
That's hard to top. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Pujols still going strong. I hope that he comes back because he's got to be, I think he's 40 years old this year and one of the great players of all time. That's got to be pretty cool. You talked about the Nolan Ryan experience too. It's one thing to be friends with somebody who, is in the game and can hook you up, if you want to call it that, with experiences. But it's another thing when you're like, this dude is texting me right now, and I get to go to Wrigley Field and hang with one of the greatest right-handed hitting players of all time. Really?
Now, one of the funniest moments is, and you can look it up, if you Google Bart throws lefty, just Google that and look it up. So we had to do a first pitch at Astros game. And so I'm wearing the vintage Nolan jersey, and I don't know much about the Astros, wasn't a fan of them because I'm a Rangers fan. And I'm sitting in the dugout. Reed Ryan comes up behind me. He's like, hey, man. As soon as he said it, just because he looked so much like him, I'm like, you're Nolan Ryan's son. I didn't know he was the president or whatever he is. Didn't know anything about him. He's like, man, I'm glad to have you here. My kids, we're all fans. And I was like, oh, so what do you do here? I had no idea.
That's amazing.
And what's crazy is we've thrown so many first pitches that we kind of don't enjoy it. Just kind of who's going to throw it this time?
Sure. And
so we got to a point where we would do rock, paper, scissors, and whoever they say won. I say whoever lost that had to throw it, you had to do whatever the others dared you to do and not tell anybody. So I was dared to throw left-handed, but not tell anybody and look like I'm sincerely trying to throw it left-handed. And I can't and we take these things very seriously. And so I remember I just lost the bet. I had to do it. And then Reed Ryan walks up. He's like, hey, man. I'm like, oh, no. He's standing here. I'm about to go out. And not only that, but Nolan, I think, is here somewhere in the crowd. And I haven't met him yet. And he's going to see me throw. It's the most amazing video ever. So I walk out, and I have to shake hands with the catcher. And I just say, I'm sorry. He goes, what does that mean? And I just kept walking, didn't say a word. The band had all their cameras out. So there's 5 angles of me. It looks like I had a stroke. It's like, and it was one hop to the guy. The only reason I remember, it was the same day that 50 Cent threw a crazy weird pitch at Wrigley, and it made SportsCenter. Same day.
Yes. Yeah.
But it was the funniest thing. Yeah, you just Google Bart throws lefty, and that's the first day that I met Nolan Ryan, my hero, with his shirt on. And I was mortified, and I didn't know that until after I took the bet. But
the Nolan Ryan meeting, you posted something. I think it was on Instagram of did you pose a picture of him asking you for an autograph? Is that what it was?
Yeah. When I met him, we talked for a little bit, and I was like, hey man, I was like, this is going to sound weird. I said, but is there any way we can pretend that you want my autograph? And he was like, so Sling Blade, I'm going to get into it, man. I'm going to get into this real good. And so as I'm holding the ball, he's leaning over, and he's overacting. I'm like, he was such a great sport. Yeah. And but yeah, that was that same day after I had to apologize and say, I can finally tell you that I'm not left-handed. And he goes, oh, good, because I can't be friends with no wusses like that. I was like, no, not that my right hand's much better, but I can at least look like I'm throwing it. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, he was a great sport, and it's so great when you meet someone you look up to, and they actually turn out to be more than you hope for. And Nolan was that way. He was such a sweet guy, and such a great family, and he's my all-time sports hero, I guess. Well, baseball sports hero. Like, I'd have to say probably if I met Roger Staubach, I'd be pretty freaked out.
I'm with you. That's my number 12.
Yeah.
My earliest sports memory wearing that 12 Roger
Yep.
Staubach jersey. If I met
Yeah.
him, I think I would freak out too. Let's put it
That
that
was
way.
me at Christmas time, that little Sears and Roebuck number 12 uniform I wore it every Christmas.
Absolutely.
With the double bar.
Yes. We're definitely the same age. I'm looking at your age. And
Yeah.
Yep. We grew up the same time because that's exactly what Christmas
Yes.
is like for me. I want to be mindful of our time, and I'm so grateful that you've been a great sport to come on the show today, Bart. As we close, gets a little more deeper, right? As we wind to the end here, it's a question that we ask all of our guests, but I think it's an interesting question now in terms of all of what's going on. Because I remember it was February 29th of all days, leap year day. And I was at a packed theater with 3,000 other people watching you and Jeremy Camp put on a phenomenal show in Connecticut here. And it was 10, 11 days later, and we're in a pandemic and everything stops. So I'm wondering over the past few months, and certainly all the stuff that you mentioned about protests and the race relations and all that going on, what's the great lesson the Lord is teaching you right now in all that's been going on the last few months, maybe even dating back to March 11th or whenever it was when the pandemic was declared. But the last 3-4 months here, what's the Lord been showing you and teaching you?
Man, one is just to be grateful. It's like I'm sure there are a lot of people that are struggling going through these times, and for whatever reason, we are able to kind of to step back and just say, okay, we're okay financially, and just really leaned into the fact that I'm somebody that stays busy and maybe a borderline workaholic, and just don't even realize the trivial things that I can do to busy up my day. And when this thing first happened, it got to a point. At first, I was like stressing out because it was like I compare it to like the first time I went on a cruise.
Mm-hmm.
That first day or two, I feel like a caged animal. Then you start getting acclimated, and you're like, "Oh, this isn't too bad." And it's kind of how it felt. I was panicked and worried, and then I was like, there's nothing I can do about it. And it's not like taking vacation to where there's a deadline and things waiting on you. There's no deadlines. There's nothing. Like, we're just never seen anything like it. And so all of a sudden it got to the point to where the greatest part of my day was getting a snow cone with my girls. And it was like a successful day.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as you can appreciate those moments, to have this season, trying to be grateful in a situation like this is to think, man, God, how do we make the best of this? What good is coming out of this? And for me personally, it's been to stop and feel safe and fully attentive and just embrace everything that my family is. Because the reason it's important to me, because the way I grew up, like, I love driving. Driving is my hobby. Like, I love cars and I love driving all the time. And found out through a lot of counseling that part of that is because home was never a safe place. That was my escape when I was a kid. As soon as I had a driver's license, I would go, and there was no place safer than me and my car. And to this day, it's still something that I find myself leaning into. And so one of the challenges years ago was that you need to find a way to make home a safe place, even though technically everything about it's safe. Is something had to give in me to be able to sit still and just kind of exhale. And it's gotten better over the years, but during this pandemic would be the biggest breakthrough of me just getting up, not thinking I had to run from something or go look busy or go do this. It's got to get done, to where I would sit there in days where I never took my house pants off and just was like, and did nothing but try to watch the Marvel movies in a row with my 10-year-old in order, and thinking, this is and I'll never forget this. Like, this is something that I'll cherish, and more importantly, he'll cherish for the rest of his life. And man, no one in our lifetimes ever gotten that opportunity to say, hey, we're going to take about 4 months off to where everything stops. And so we're trying to treat it as a gift in a weird way. And that, and it's, I'm not taking it lightly, because I know people are wrestling with stuff, but for us, it was like, for me just to sit here and say, okay, nothing's more important than this. It's to the point to where things will never go back to the same. And I pray that that's the case. Some things will change, and I can see what's important. And there's stuff that's got to be done, but it's like, man, like yesterday was like, I'm not a fan of Father's Day that much. And, I'm sure there's a million reasons why, but just never been a big holiday to me.
Sure.
Never celebrated when my dad was alive, and then after he died, it was too painful to celebrate. Sorry, my dogs are going nuts.
It's okay.
And somebody just got home and they're in their cage in there because I don't mess with them. Anyway, so it's just never been a thing for me. And then yesterday was the best Father's Day, and all we did, we swam a little bit, and then my kids made dinner, which consisted of like a bowl of Doritos, a grilled cheese. It was like what they wanted to make, not what I wanted.
Right.
And like a bowl, I think a bowl of candy. It was crazy. And it was like, it was the best Father's Day. Like, and my wife's like, sorry, it wasn't that big of a deal. And I was like, it was perfect, because if you overdid it, that'd be uncomfortable. And I said, man, it's like every day's great, but it was like, for the first time in my life, I was sad to see the day end, because it was like everybody was content with being with each other and nowhere to go. It was just an amazing feeling. And so that's what for somehow through this, specifically through this, I'll look back at my life 20 years from now, however long I live, and I'll look back at, this was the seasons when I became safe. I felt safe at home, where everything changed. I genuinely believe that. And so that's what God's been teaching me, to where sometimes I'm not caught up in the news because I don't want to read about it. I just want to, I want to just be here and be present. And so to the point to where, like, when we started talking about getting back on the road, I was kind of sad, because I was like, man, I don't want to go back to what it was like then. And so we're going to restructure things to make this the most. I don't want my family to wonder if they were more important than my job. I want them to know beyond a shadow of a doubt. And that's what this has kind of revealed to me.
That's good. I didn't even mention it. You have the new single is Hurry Up and Wait. Ironically, the title with everything that's been going on. Maybe that was planned, Bart Millard. But you also have a new album coming out. Can you share a little bit about some new music that might be coming our way for us to hear?
Yeah, we Hurry Up and Wait was written actually in December or November. And then when all this happened, because it was the idea. I was teaching my son the scripture, wait on the Lord and renew your strength. And when all this happened, I begged the label, can we put it out? Maybe it's not a radio single, but can we just make a video? It just seems appropriate.
Yeah.
And so we did that. And then the album, it's been almost 16 months since we started making the album. We released Almost Home as the first single last fall. It was supposed to be out this spring. Things changed. Yep. And now it's either going to release late fall or spring of 21, depending what touring and everything looks like.
Okay.
And so, and also, how do you not write new songs with everything you're going through? And so songs, we had a full album written, and now half of it's scratched, and we're writing new stuff. So we're still in the process of making I got a meeting tomorrow about when the album has to actually be handed in. So we'll see.
There you go. We'll look forward to seeing that. Bart Millard, this has been great, my friend. Thank you for your time. You've been generous, and for your friendship, and just appreciate your heart for the Lord and your love of sports. Hopefully we get sports back soon. And thanks so much for being here on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks. Either a sporting event or a concert. Hopefully something will get us near each other.
I hope so too, my friend.
Yes.
And many thanks to Bart Millard for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. One of my favorite people. That was a fun conversation. I hope that you guys enjoyed that, especially it was a little longer than a lot of the conversations we've been doing, but I've been wanting to have Bart on for 3 years now on the show, on the podcast. And this was one of those opportunities where he may not normally have this amount of time going forward, because he tours. He's a lead singer of a band, and he's out there doing things regarding his new album, and just doesn't have a ton of time to do interviews like this. So I wanted to take the opportunity, and Bart said he had the time, to keep him as long as we could and ask him as many questions as we could and have a good conversation. And I thought this was a lot of fun. Certainly, being fellow Cowboy fans, we bonded there, and certainly big sports fans. But even the relationship that he had with his dad and I have had with my father, both strained relationships, I feel a little bit more of a connection with Bart than maybe a lot of other people I've met, specifically in the entertainment industry, because of what he's went through. And again, that movie, I can only imagine, along with the song, I can only imagine, powerful. It really is. I hope you'll take some time, maybe watch it during this pandemic, and really just challenge yourself to enter into a place of forgiving others who have wronged you. So many thanks to Bart, and we do appreciate him for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. We also appreciate our sponsors, IJM, the International Justice Mission. Check them out at ijm.org/TF and become a Freedom Partner. Join the fight to end slavery in our lifetime. And Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. A chance for you to team up with Compassion and help release a child from poverty is available right now. Go to compassion.com/team up and help release a child from poverty today. Thank you again for tuning in to Sports Spectrum. Do us a favor, click that subscribe button on whatever app you're listening to this podcast on. That way you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. And then leave us a review if you could. A quick review on iTunes, Apple iTunes app would be amazing to help get the word out about what we're doing here, the intersection of sports and faith here at Sports Spectrum. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.